when we finally spread the ashes of the stillborn, it was an incredibly healing thing, but we both wrote a letter to him. And it was amazing that this little baby never took a breath. And yet the immense amount of love and how much he helped me to be grateful for the son I do have, how he made me a better father because I appreciate it so much, how he strengthened my wife's relationship.
You got married when you were 35. You've got a couple kids. What is the role of being a father like to you? And getting married later, is that easier? Is it harder?
I don't think a lot of people talk about how many women have to go through miscarriage. We went through one or two of those, and then we also had a stillbirth that was an absolutely brutal experience. A healthy baby, 20 weeks along, and her water broke. Like, I remember pulling over when her water broke. Like, there were signs of it, so we were racing to the hospital and looking at me with defeated eyes, almost trying to tell me sorry that this is happening. And like, God, she felt so bad because I'd always wanted to be a dad. And so she's just like, I'm failing you. It's like the third time. Each day after that, we were stuck in our beds with friends bringing us food, numb, just for the next 2 weeks. That was us. I don't know. Like, if we had just been flippant and not trying to build our family and not have these experiences, life to me wouldn't be as fulfilling. It wouldn't be as rich. I have a deep relationship with my little boy. My little girl gets cuter every day. She's just about to figure out how to crawl, and it's so fun to watch these things. I'm telling you, no pursuit of money is worth more than that to me.
This is an episode with Travis Prince. Travis is a great friend of mine, first of all. And so it was fun to just bring a friend on and have a meaningful discussion about life, about marriage, about religion. We talked about his relationship with God and how his religious views and beliefs have changed over the last several years. We talked about an experience that Travis had delivering his baby and shortly after losing his baby, and how that impacted and defined his life. This was a fun episode between two friends. Welcome to the Rollercoaster Podcast. Strap in. Thanks for being here.
Travis Prince, welcome to the Rollercoaster Podcast.
It's good to be back.
I sure hope I don't call you Justin today. That would be just a catastrophic moment. So when Justin came on the show, the first thing I said was, it's great to have you on the show. Like, how does it feel to be the less good looking brother of between you and Travis? And like, he didn't like that at all.
Well, I was going to say, if you're going to call me Justin, you could call me a lot worse. I've been called a lot worse. No, he's solid, man. Justin's super solid.
Thank you to our sponsors over at Bucked Up. I love this company. I love their products, their apparel, and their supplements. Recently, they dropped the mother of all pre-workouts, Mother Bucker. This is not for the faint of heart. This will make you want to claw your face off. So don't get stuck in traffic when you're headed to the gym. I love these guys. I love this company, and I love their products. They are clearly the best tasting pre-workout on the entire market, and they're number one for a reason. Bucked Up is my favorite workout brand, hands down. And they also have my favorite apparel for working out and just for daily life. It's Lululemon-like quality, but for a fraction of the price that's affordable. So head over to their site, buckedup.com, where you can check it out. And for 20% off their entire site, use the code TylerHall20.
How is your relationship with him, by the way?
It's
the audience
good.
knows him, so.
Yeah. He and I are incredibly tight. We always have been. We're 2 years apart. I'm a very loyal person as is. And, so I'm just a very, very loyal brother to Justin. If anybody knows him, they're kind of following his story right now and the things that have happened to him professionally. But the thing is, Justin he's just a rock of a human being. Most black and white person I've ever met. He has an on switch and off switch, and it's usually on, going in the right direction. But he's the kind of guy that if drinking is bad for you, then he'll never drink ever. If working out is good for you, he'll work out every single day. Like
Yep.
That's how he is. He is black and white. Go.
Yep.
So he's a good role model to a lot of people, and yeah, we're tight brothers.
Could you beat him in a 3-point shooting competition?
I beat him every single time we have a 3-point contest.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I was with Justin.
That's right. I was actually jealous I wasn't a part of this.
Did you see this?
I saw it. Uh-huh.
So I was with Justin at his house in St. George a few weeks ago, and we he was kind of touring us around the house. We walked into his gym, and I said, hey, $100, 3-point, 10 shots each. Pick your spot. And like his eyes lit up, like, oh, easy money, right?
Oh, he loves competition.
So he had no idea that I played at all, and so I lit him up. And I took his money. I made sure he paid me like that day right there.
I love that.
And it was just like, you could tell it really affected him because he's not used to like losing. He's very competitive and he's got a good shot. And I think he made maybe 6 out of 10. I think I hit 8 out of 10. And he was just like, I will get vengeance on you.
So when he bought, nobody knows this story. When he bought that house, he and I bantered quite a bit. When he bought that house, he's got this basketball court. And he went out there every day practicing in anticipation for the day that I came down to see his house for the first time. And he marched me right over to the basketball court, the home court. He's been practicing.
So let's go.
I think we played a game of horse, and I was wearing a long sleeve shirt like this. And I remember he was H and I was HORS. And finally I take off my long sleeve shirt and I'm just, like I knew I could come back still, but it's going to take good shooting to do it. And I knew, he had been on fire, the whole thing. He was all excited and he's talking trash. Like, oh, here he is taking his shirt off. He's ready now, this kind of thing. And I came back and beat him, and then I beat him in a 3-point contest. And he just has not practiced the same ever since. Like he just hasn't quite gone back to the court the same since that day.
Well, dude, his arms are so damn big. I'm like, I don't know how you even get this thing to the rim, dude. It's like he's a genetic freak.
Oh, he's solid.
So let's get into it. We're gonna cover a lot today. I think one of the fun things about this episode, and I got the inspiration to do this because a mutual friend of ours, Jimmy, who's one of your best friends, Jimmy Rex, you went on his show. And it was kind of like two friends being dudes.
That's exactly what we were going for.
Hanging out. And that's really why I wanted to do this with you. Like, obviously, you and I aren't super close. We haven't spent a ton of time, but I consider you a good friend of mine. And
likewise.
And so I was excited to just have somebody on where it wasn't like so serious. And so, we could just have this banter. So, so I want to talk about that. I want to kick things off with a moment that I saw that I thought was really cool. So speaking of Jimmy hosts an event every year, and it's for his We Are the They group, right? Mm-hmm. And he sells tickets, and he sold out this whole, this massive venue, right? And he asked you to come and speak. Mm-hmm. And you got up on that stage, and within a few minutes, your nerves had really sort of hijacked the whole thing. Yeah. Visibly nervous, kind of shaky, couldn't get your sentences together. And you, instead of just plowing through it, you just stopped and you said, guys, I'm really nervous here. Yeah. This is I've never done a keynote like this before in front of this many people. Give me a little grace. And the whole audience stood up and they cheered you along. Tell me about that experience. What was that like for you?
Well, there were several things that were going on. That was the first day I had been back on my feet from having a surgery done on my back. And so I had been on pain pills the entire week heading up to that. Before that, I'd had business things were going really, really poorly at that time. It happened to be on the same day that my grandma passed away and her funeral's there, was that morning. There were several other things going on. So physically you're not there, emotionally not there. And then I was nervous for it to begin with. I went back and forth on what to talk about. I really haven't done nearly as much speaking as Justin and Jimmy and these guys had. I knew it was something I was interested in exploring and still kind of am. But everything was pushing me to get out of doing it that day. I didn't want to do it at all. But I'd already given my word I was going to. I already told Jimmy, and I wasn't going to put that back on Jimmy and go find somebody else. And so it was plow through to even get on stage. My buddy took a picture of my wife scratching my head before I went on. And I mean, I'm just like out of sorts. I'm just completely out of sorts. And so I get up there, and just like you said, it wasn't just the nerves. It was like your first day out of bed in over a week, just everything was going on. I was like, it was just, my game was not on at all. And yeah, one thing, that I really appreciated about Jimmy's group is it is a great audience to be able to be vulnerable in front of. Now, did I think that they would react the way they did, where they all just stood up, cheering, like, motivating on, like, let's hear it. Like, you got this, dude. That was a really cool experience. Yeah. Like, what's so funny is people will, forget anything that I talked about. Like, that's what people will relate to, because we've all been nervous up there. And so in a weird way, it kind of played, to show a vulnerable side. And I by nature am a confident person. So I think it was maybe interesting for people to see me be that nervous and have to take a moment and that kind of thing. And so I think it turned out to be pretty well. I actually have not gone back and watched it, like, because I beat myself up a little bit because I know how I'm capable of performing, and I knew, where it went. So I actually haven't gone back and watched it yet. But I've had, a lot of people reach out and show a lot of love and support for, the vulnerability of the moment that it was.
It was a cool moment, man. I literally, the first time that I saw it, I cried, because it was just like, man, you have all these men. We live in this world, right, where men's default is not to lift each other up. It's just not. Men's default is to be macho and selfish and put on this facade or this mask, right? And when they immediately defaulted to let's lift him, dude, I was like,
that cool?
That's the way the world's supposed to work.
Like I remember locking eyes with Michael McHenry. He was on the front row, and dude, the encouragement I'm getting out of that dude's eyes, it was just so cool. Everybody like, you got this. That's really the cool thing about that group, is, you say men default to this, kind of, I did in sports. I definitely would size people up in sports, and that did bleed over into my competitiveness against people in the street and that kind of thing. But I always felt like I did have that type of support system, whether it was my brothers, whether it was, I've always had good, close friends. And so one thing that's nice to see these days is other men getting, realizing you don't have to be the tough guy. You can have close friends. You can open up when you're struggling. Because I've had that blessing my entire life. I've always been surrounded with really great men.
Yeah. How crucial is that to starting at a young age as a young man to the outcome of how their life will eventually be?
I think it's massively crucial. I mean, it's interesting because you hear a lot of stories of people that have gone through massive trials. I've gone through them alone, and they've come out stronger on the other side. Yeah. But the thing is, life is hard as it is. It's hard as it is. It's hard to be a teenager. It's hard to be younger than a teenager. It's hard to be older. It's hard to get, go out into the world and go, generate an income and find a woman that will marry you and provide for her and your kids, and the whole thing. Life is hard. And so the bottom line is, any support you can get from other good people to be successful at this journey is massive.
You talked about your word, right? This is one thing that I really admire about you. And I would even say, Justin, like, let me share a cool experience about your brother.
Yeah.
Okay? Not to make this the Justin Prince show, because again, you are the better looking brother and the whole deal. So
I hope he's hearing this.
He will. I'll make sure of it. So I hosted a men's retreat in Sedona earlier this year for a brand that I'm building called Levels, that I'm clearly not ashamed of marketing on my podcast.
Can't wait to get a hoodie, man.
We'll talk about. I'll give you this one, in fact. And I asked Justin to come out and be a part of it and speak, and he said, I'd actually love to just like attend the whole thing, because this sounds right up my alley. Like, I'd love to get together with these kind of men. And so he the day before, he calls me and he says, hey dude, I've got an issue. And I'm like, oh shoot, it's going to be about the retreat, right? And he goes, my girls, it's snowing really bad. Like, do you remember the 2 days where it was like in January, it was like, you got like 50 inches of snow or whatever. Right. Like, the whole city basically shut down. He said, said Salt Lake's getting pounded like heavier than we ever have in a 24-hour period. My girls have a dance competition up there this weekend. Missy was going to take him and drive him home, but now she's feeling uncomfortable with driving home in the night afterwards. And he's like, dude, I really don't want to. He goes, I'm a man of my word. I don't want to cancel this. And I said, look, you do what you got to do. Like, if you can't come, dude, don't sweat it all. He's like, let me figure it out. Let me call you back. So a couple hours later, calls me. He's like, hey, I think I've got it. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive out the night before. Okay, so it was like the first night was a Thursday night. So I'm going to drive from St. George to Sedona, 6-7 hours. I'll stay that night with the group, kind of kick things off. Do you mind if I present like first thing the next morning instead of that next afternoon, right? So no problem. We can shift around. He presents. He lights the whole place on fire. It was like a great kind of kickoff presentation, the whole thing. Turns around right after that, gets back in his car, drives home to St. George, 7 hours, straight to the airport. He's got his bag packed, doesn't even stop, goes straight to the airport, jumps on a plane in St. George, flies to Salt Lake for the end of his daughter's things, and then drives from Salt Lake back to St. George 5 hours. Okay, so all because he gave me his word that he would do something.
There you go.
So
yeah, that's how we were raised.
Is that just the way the Prince boys are?
If the Prince boys tell you something, you know you can believe it. Yeah.
How does that happen? That too seems to be a lost art.
I don't operate any different way. So like whether other people are, going back on their word, I don't know. I don't surround myself in that circle, you know. Does it surprise me at all that Justin found a way to do it because he said he was going to do it? Like that is par for the course. It's exactly what I would have expected him to do.
Yeah.
Why we're that way? I mean, I just think I don't know what to say other than I can't imagine being different than that.
Yeah. Does that mean that when you commit to something, you're a lot more thoughtful and intentional about saying yes to things?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We definitely, I have no problem saying no to something I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I think my friends would probably say sometimes that I'll drag out a no if it's something, and it's because I'm trying to figure out in my head, if I'm going to.
Yeah. When you say yes, it's all the way.
It's all in. Yeah. And so, but yeah, like it's not hard for me to identify this is something I want to do and this is something I don't want to do. I don't really have to calculate it too much. But I will say, like, I will, sometimes you have to get real clever, like he did, on how to pull it off. And, but I don't know. I don't feel like I run into many situations where I commit to something and I can't pull it off. I can't think of any.
You said a quote that I really like that I want to read, and I want to get your perspective on it. You said that through the uncertainty you may be facing, the humiliation that they have in their community, and the pain that they have caused themselves and they've caused others, nothing is ever as bad as it seems. As adversities are God's greatest teachers. And then you said God will never give you more than you can handle in one single day. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
So that came really from our childhood more than anything else. I as you say that last sentence, what I remember specifically was I remember my parents were going through a divorce. It's painful, and this was before divorce was popular. Like, we were kids. We're the only people we knew that got divorced, you know? And I remember driving with my mom, and she started veering, like her mind was so preoccupied with what was going on in our lives that our car started veering off the road, heading straight toward a parked car. And I had to grab the wheel and kind of just jerk it so that we wouldn't hit the parked car. We just keep going. Then she snapped out of it, and and everything's fine. But I just remember thinking, there are times where if you look back at everything that happened and all the different times that we had to move, that you had to, you couldn't afford things, all the different challenges that you're facing, There was a space where, our dad went to prison. There was a space where, we were having to watch our mom date, like all the different things that just come with this. And I remember thinking, like, looking back at all those things, everything's fine now. And that you get to a point where you do get through that storm. And it's funny because I remember thinking I wouldn't go put my parents back together if I could. Like, I now have a new mom, or not a new mom. I have a stepmom, a stepdad. I have 3 little sisters that I would not have had. I have a little brother I wouldn't have had. I wouldn't change it now. Like, everything's good now.
Yeah.
Even though at the time you wouldn't ever want to go through it. It's just at the end of the day, everything came out all right. But if you had to take all of that in one day, that's just too much. And I just remember thinking on that drive, I'm like, she's going through so much right now, but that's just that one drive. We're going to get to our destination. Everything's going to be all right. We'll face the next challenge, but challenges rarely are something that that's the straw that broke the camel's back and you can't get over it. That's just never the case. If you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you'll get through just about anything. Yeah. And I don't know if you're tapping into faith at that point, or just internal strength. I personally found in my life's challenges that those darkest times are when I get the most, like, spiritual strength, without question. And so, sometimes it is pulling into something that's greater than yourself to be able to get through it. But I have never once in my life, and people that I associate with, seen, their darkest times and not seeing them get through it just one day at a time. And then they look back like, how did I get through so much? So it really is just an issue of don't quit. And a lot of what you just said there, that was from my dad, who it's mind blowing for me to look at his life, because he'll say he was a wild man back in the day. Made tons of mistakes, but he's become like this incredibly gentle, just wonderful human being. And he always was. He's always a good dude. But like his, if this life is about becoming more Christ-like, that's exactly what he's become. And he, I'm telling you, like those nights before you go into prison, those are dark freaking nights. And those days when your wife tells you she doesn't want to live with you anymore, those are dark days. But one of the things he always told us, he goes, when he was doing the whole prison thing, he lost, by the way, he lost all of his money. I forget how old he was. And this was not the first time he lost all of his money in his life. This is probably like the 4th time he's lost all the money in his life. But he was about retirement age. He's about 60 years old when he lost everything, and was now facing prison on top of that. So you can imagine starting life over at 60 years old with absolutely nothing except for the people that still have your back and love you. Like, there was nothing left. In fact, when he got out of prison, he had to go to a halfway house, as they're transitioning you back into society. And it wasn't like he could just go back into real estate. You have to have like a job that they approve of. So there's a gym called The Gym down in at City Creek Mall, and he had to be a janitor during his halfway house time. He had to be a janitor, cleaning toilets and everything. This is a former like multimillionaire, like powerful man. And I remember going up and visiting him at the gym, and bringing him some food and just hanging out with him for a while he was doing his janitor duties, going through this, and. So he's been through all that. And what he said, and this is something I'll never forget, is he just goes, I want to show my boys how to go through life dealing with the adversity that comes. So he just showed up every day, woke up early, got to work, did what he had to do that day, zero ego, and just paid his price. And by the way, now he's ultra successful again, happy as could be. But it's such a wonderful testament to have that kind of example, because I've gone through, when you're going through hard things and you get to turn to another guy that has actually gone through worse and say, I don't need you to tell me how to fix this. I just need to tell me you've been through it. Yeah. I just need to tell me that like it's going to be okay and that I can do it. And and he's definitely been that for me.
There's a book that our marriage therapist recommended that we read called The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of the book is exactly what the title sounds like, right? Which is, it's a gift to be imperfect. Like, it's a gift to go through sometimes self-induced, really dark, low points, right? Because what does that do? You think about the idea of Jesus Christ and the atonement, which is that he suffered all so he could relate to all of his children, right? And therefore forgive them for the things that they go through in their life, right? But I think about us as individuals, it's like the more that we've gone through, the lower we've been, and by the way, the higher we've been, it creates this spectrum of relativity where now we can relate to so many people.
I'll butcher this from Brené Brown, but she said, our imperfections, how does she say this? Our imperfections, basically, are a sign that we're all in this together, kind of thing. You know, none of us are perfect. We're all in this together. Like they're basically something that can be honored in one another.
Yeah.
I'm sure I butchered that. Sorry, Renee.
In that quote, you talked about God. Like, you and I haven't caught up in a long time on our spiritual journeys. I have no idea where you stand, right?
Yeah.
Like, how is your relationship with God today?
Yeah.
Are you still a believer in Jesus Christ? Like, I'd love for you to unpack just spiritually where you're at.
Yeah. Massive believer in God. I mean, really, as far as I see it, unless there's some sort of alien creation somewhere, there's two ways this thing goes. Either God created this, or there was some sort of big bang and it's just evolved, right? And I'll take the God stance on that. I am still a believer in Christ, very much so. I don't really have like the strongest opinions on all this, but I'm probably a little bit disappointed with Christianity, not Christ's teaching, but the way that we approach Christianity as Christians. I probably have an issue with in many cases. I see a lot of judgment in Christianity, and I also see a lot of a deep desire to have to be right above all else, as opposed to, just finding a deep love for Christ and, a desire to be better, a desire to grow, a deep love for God. It seems like we are so adamant about knowing what's right, knowing like, no, this teaching says this, not that, and so I guess to answer your question, I'm a deep believer in Christ and deep believer in God, but I don't believe that I follow really any direct Christian pathway on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to unravel that with you. I think prior to this podcast, we talked just a little bit about it, and you made a comment, which is, I'm sort of like in this religion a la carte mode, right? And one of the discussions I love having, or debates I love having, is just the difference between religion and spirituality. And like, which one is more important? And what do they mean? And are they the same, or are they different, right? How do you think about that? Like, what did you mean by religion a la carte? And, what do you think about just spirituality versus having to be following a specific religion?
First off, I've had a debate with friends on, is the world better off having had religion, or would it be better off if none of these had ever been created? And it's crazy how good of an argument that is, regardless of who's right. Because there are a lot of terrible wars that have happened in the name of religion, a lot of killing, a lot of judgment, a lot of shame, a lot of, cults, a lot of these different things.
Yeah.
I still am a believer that this world is better off because we've had a religion. I grew up LDS. I don't practice it right now, but I still have a deep love for the LDS church. Still considering whether or not I should raise my kids in it, because I, quite frankly, from a Christian perspective, haven't found something better. And I feel like it was very beneficial to me, in my childhood as well. So when I talk about a la carte, when Larry King Live hosted Gordon B. Hinckley, if you go look at that, the church was on a trajectory to have over 300 million members in like less than a decade. Like, it was on fire. Fastest growing religion in the U.S., the whole thing. Internet age comes out, it grows about 1% now, and that's the people that, considering that's not including activity, like, 'cause I think a lot of people still have their records in, but the information age has not been that great to the church. It just really hasn't.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that's true in many religions, where in the information age is a really fascinating thing to think about. Like, the internet has been out for what, 20 years, something like that, accessible really for maybe 10 to 15 of that. And then the actual information getting out to people from 5 to 10. So we are 5 to 10 years into this, like, just onslaught of information that we never had access to. And so when I talk about a la carte, what I'm referring to is I will take the good from, whether it's the LDS Church, Catholicism, Hinduism, like any, I really like to find the teachings that I just believe to be absolutely beautiful teachings. I had a Muslim friend, and, I was asking him about Ramadan, I was asking about the fasting, about the prayer 5 times a day. And there's aspects of it that I probably am not going to get into. And there's aspects of it that I really think are very fascinating. So when I talk about a la carte, I'm saying, I'm in a stage of my life where I treat religion the way I treat anything else in my life. There's the books that I read that I take things from, and some things I don't. There's information I gather that I apply into my life, and other things I don't. So and I think that's a right approach, because there are some things that if you are so stringent on one ideology, you have to start doing pretty significant mental gymnastics to justify some of the things that have happened, or some of the things that were taught. And, I won't go into any specifics. Anybody, that's following their own religion knows what those things are. I don't necessarily want to be an apologist for a bunch of things that I don't think are right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, just because someone did something wrong, we'll say in this case, like a Joseph Smith or a Brigham Young or something of that nature, does not mean they weren't inspired by God. It doesn't mean there weren't wonderful teachings that came from them, but it doesn't mean I'm going to blindly follow those paths at all. So I look for the good in any capacity that I can find it. I try and apply those things into my life like I would anything else. But I don't see a scenario where I would just follow a church because I think it's the only one way that, we're getting back to heaven. I think that gets kind of silly.
Well, do you know how many people have ever, roughly how many people have lived on Earth?
Well, what is there, 6-7 billion right now? Call about 15 probably. I don't know.
200
billion?
200 billion.
That's wild.
Plus, right?
That's wild.
So the number is somewhere between 200 and 220 billion people have lived on the Earth. Okay, so you think about that, right? So, and then you think about the total population size of members of any church, and all of them are a subset of a subset of a fraction of a fraction of a percentage, right? And so a lot of the clarity to me of, is one of these things right, came through a realization that I don't think God would discriminate against all of his other children that are outside of any specific sect or religion, right? Mm-hmm. I just don't think he would do that. And you think about the LDS Church, because I know these numbers better, there's been about 25 or 30 million baptized members ever, which again is like 0.00701% of a percent, right? So it's like, what about the other 200 billion children of God? Like, they're not going to have the same opportunity to experience that level of joy here in this life, or maybe the opportunity to live with our families and with God and with Jesus for eternities, right? So I think for me, once that one was like, oh yeah, he wouldn't do that. Once that was off, that's where, I think a lot of my questions on religion started to manifest themselves.
It's interesting. God, there's so many directions to go with this conversation. I really don't need to spend all my time trying to justify why I don't believe in a certain religion, because once again I am fine to take the good things from that. But I'll tell you one thing, that there's some things that as you say them out loud, they just don't feel right. Okay, so we'll take modern Christianity. If you were really to boil it down into how many people are going to make it into heaven and how many are going to go to hell, I mean, we're talking a significant number going to hell. And, they may not say it like that, but that's exactly what we're talking about. Like, oh, they're going, that person's not saved. That's right. Dude.
Like the majority.
We're talking like, I don't know if I can put a percentage on it, but we're talking 90 something percent are not making it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we have a much more loving God than that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the game we play trying to make sense of religion is pretty silly. I really do. Like, so you're talking about these numbers. Only a third of the world believes in Christ being the Redeemer to begin with, and so we're just chopping off a third right there. No, and then you look at the history of, you can say, the LDS Church. There's some checkered pieces there. Even the history of the Bible, like the thing that's teaching us. I mean, that was passed on for centuries, word of mouth. There's a lot of pieces here where if someone doesn't believe the way that you do, you don't have to get defensive. You can actually understand where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. You can see that there's actually an argument to having some doubt, and it doesn't mean you're a faithless person and this kind of thing. But I will tell you this. Okay. I've had friends ask me, why do I believe in God? I had a most recent spiritual experience. I was trying to figure out what I want to do next in my career. I drove myself out to Florida to go stay with my brother to, kind of explore a different business opportunity. My wife stayed at home with the kids, and I was out there alone, for, some time. And, I had felt this impression to just get down on my knees and pray. And maybe 5 times I've had that impression to just get down on my knees and pray, over the last year and a half. Right. And I justified it off 4 times of the 5, just like, well, I always have a kind of a prayer in my heart.
That's the best one.
But this time I was alone in Florida. It hit me very, very clearly. Just get down on your knees and pray. It didn't tell me exactly what to say. It just said, go do it. And so I did. And it wasn't like I had this massively spiritual experience as I was praying. But I remember before I started that prayer, I was very clear that this was going to be a man-to-man conversation. I wasn't going to be flowery in my prayer, with my speech. It was going to be me talking to my dad. Man to man. Here's what's going on in my life. Here's what the desires of my heart are. Here are the things I'm trying to accomplish. Here's what this is the kind of person I'm trying to be, the kind of father I'm trying to be. It was a man-to-man conversation. And it was really interesting because the prayer was not a lot of asking for anything. It was because, I don't go to my dad and be like, I need this, I need that. It was just, Dad, here's what I'm doing. Here's why I'm in Florida. Here's what I'm trying to figure out. Here's what's happened. Here's what I think I would like, but your will, not mine, this kind of thing. And it was just such a man-to-man conversation. And a lot of it was gratitude. I started thinking about the beautiful family I have, the home I'm building up in a gated community, the beautiful kids I have, a woman that has my back through anything. I mean, I just really was like grateful during most of this conversation than anything else, even though it was kind of a hard time in my life. And I remember I get off that call, or I'm sorry, I get off that prayer, and not more than 15 seconds later, I get a call. This one was actually from Kyle Van Noy, who I know he has my number, but he's never called me before. Like Kyle and I are buddies, but like we've never actually had a phone call just one-on-one before. And Kyle starts just gassing me up. He goes, "Bro, you were just on my mind." He's like, "I just wanted to reach out to you." He goes, "You're one of the good dudes, man." He goes, "I freaking love you." He's like, "What's going on in your life? Where are you guys living now?" "Well, we're building this home up in Pepperwood." He's like, "What are you doing for work?" "Well, I'm actually in Florida right now exploring this." I mean, everything that I had covered in my prayer that I was grateful for, I'm getting this call from Kyle Van Noy, and we are covering everything that was discussed in that conversation, and he's leading it, and he has no idea. I actually haven't even talked to him since. I've been meaning to take him to dinner and explain to him the role he played that day, and he has no clue. Because my love language is words of affirmation. And I mean, he filled me up that day. Then I get another email that was another answer to something in that prayer 10 minutes after that. It was so profound to me that God was using these tools as a way to say, "I see you. You're not alone. I hear you. Keep going." And it wasn't like, "Go do this." It was just, you are known in this universe. Like God knows you personally. And it brought me to tears. Like I couldn't tell that story. The next 10 times I told it, I couldn't tell without crying. And so when people would ask me, "Why do you believe in God?" I'd say this: "Look, let me tell you this story. You can call this a coincidence, but let me tell you this: coincidences don't make you cry. Like there's something more beautiful, more powerful than just he happened to call at that time." Yeah. And so I'm a profound believer in God, and thank God that I am, because I personally wouldn't want to go through this life without that type of belief.
On the flip side of that, right, you think about Kyle's role in that, it's all the more reason why you should show God that he can trust you when he prompts you to do things.
Oh, for sure.
Right. So you want to be Kyle in that story. You want to be the one that has a
Absolutely.
thought.
And look, I was probably just on his list of the next guy to call. We've all kind of got these lists. Like,
Probably not.
Who knows, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I will say this. Jimmy told me, he goes, "Kyle's one of the most in tune dudes you'll ever meet." But we do get those prompts every day.
Yeah.
And, or maybe it is on a list of like, I'm going to reach out to 5 people every day, and this is the 5.
But
things work. Things work the way they're supposed to sometimes, But I can tell you, I felt God's love immensely in that moment, and Kyle had no idea what role he was playing.
It's a beautiful story. You talked a little bit about your children, your wife. I know in Utah it's popular to get married young. I got married at 21. Right, a lot of our friends got married in their 20s. You took a little bit more time. You got married when you were 35. I want to talk about just. Justin said something to me about you when I was on his podcast. And he said, "Man, the way that your countenance changes when you talk about your kids," he said, "it reminds me of Travis." That like the role that the way that you guys like take on this role as being a father is incredible, right? So I spent a lot of my time thinking about how to be a great father to my kids.
Yeah.
Now you've got a couple kids. What is the role of being a father like to you? And I want to talk a little bit about your marriage, and where things are at. Getting married later, is that easier? Is it harder? Are you indifferent on it?
I'm sure, like, I dated some really wonderful women throughout my life. And I'm sure, I don't necessarily believe in the whole soulmate thing. I think 2 people that want to make it work can make it work, if they're just committed to it. But I will say, like, I'm so glad I held out for who I held out for. She's, it was funny. Like when I first saw her, everything about her, like her smile, even her voice just matched for me. Like her elegance, like just everything was just so like, just matched for me. And so I just, like it worked out well for me, And then the journey to have kids, bro, I love kids, man. I love kids. It was a struggle to get them here. I don't think a lot of people talk about how many women have to go through a miscarriage. We went through one or two of those, and then we also had a stillbirth that was an absolutely brutal experience. Healthy baby, 20 weeks, 20 weeks along, and her water broke, and it was alive until literally birth, and it was excruciating to go through. Like I remember pulling over when her water broke. There were signs of it, so we were racing to the hospital. And I remember staring at her. She gets out of the car on the side of the highway, and like she's holding herself while the water's breaking, and looking at me with defeated eyes of just like I'm just like almost trying to tell me sorry that this is happening. And we also knew right then, like we were holding out hope that everything was going to be okay, but we knew right then in that moment that it was not going to be okay. Yeah. And like, God, she felt so bad because I'd always wanted to be a dad. And so she's just like, I'm failing you, it's like the third time. And, it's funny. I'm going to go back to the whole God thing, man. Like, I'm a good husband. But during that day, that next night, that next day, each day after that, we were stuck in our beds with friends bringing us food, watching reruns of The Office, numb, dude. That was the only thing that could make us laugh, just for the next 2 weeks. That was us, but there was just certain times where like my hand would go over and touch her, and she just started breaking down the second my hand touched her. It was like she just needed to be touched right then, and I had no clue about it. It was like all of a sudden I'm being a different level of husband. All of a sudden I'm showing up for her in a different level than I would have even known. I just felt like I was, God was just literally using me to comfort her. It was just an incredible experience for our relationship to go through that. I have a lot of friends that are either putting off marriage or they think that marriage is a joke. You lose 50, 60% in the end of divorce, all that sort of stuff. And my argument is this: like, even if your marriage fails, marriage is something you need to try, and give it and try your hardest at. Even if it fails, because it's a life experience. It's just something that there's nothing else quite like it. And if you're a lucky one like myself that is married a good woman, it'll bless your life immensely, more than just about anything else could. And then the kids come, dude. I gotta tell you, man. So I've got a little boy that's just over 2.5. I got a little girl that's about 8 months old, and I've got another little boy gonna be here in about 3 months. And yes, we have the sleepless nights. I mean, my little girl kept me up last night. Both of us, like since 3 a.m. we've been up. But there's just I don't understand why kids. There's a lot of sayings, that we would hear about both pregnancy and about childhood, like the terrible twos would be an example. Don't bring the terrible twos to my home. Like, don't put that on my kids. Like, I show up with a smile for my kids. I don't think anything about them's terrible, even when it is tough, even when I do have to discipline. Like, I am so grateful for those kids. When we finally spread the ashes of the stillborn, we were out in Hawaii, and we had some friends with us, and we did a little ceremony, and it was an incredibly healing thing. But we both wrote a letter to him, and I mean, I basically just it was amazing that this little baby never took a breath, and yet the immense amount of love. And I wrote in that letter about how much he helped me to be grateful for the son I do have that's living. How he made me a better father because I appreciate it so much. How he strengthened my wife's relationship because of the different trials we had to go through. So they're just, I don't know, like if we had just been flippant and not trying to have, trying to build our family and not have these experiences, life to me wouldn't be as fulfilling. It wouldn't be as rich. And so I love watching the progress that my kids make. I have a deep relationship with my little boy. My little girl gets cuter every day, and she's just about to figure out how to crawl, and it's so fun to watch these things. And then to see them build relationships with other people. We have little dance parties, with, we were just a little family of 4 and my wife's pregnant, but my little boy loves music with a beat like I do. He loves it. So we'll hold my daughter and sing to her and, and we'll do a little dance party together. Bro, I'm telling you, no pursuit of money is worth more than that to me. Like I want to be able to provide for them. I want to, be able to teach them how to live in this world. But I'm not going to sacrifice my life to, sacrifice my time with them, for more gain. Like I really, really, really love my kids.
Man, Travis, you're a good dude. I appreciate you being here today. And anytime we start talking about the kids, it's just like, that's everything. I mean, that's what this life is all about. So, speaking of kids, you've got to go pick up your kids.
I do.
So we're going to wrap this earlier than I think both of us would like. And that's my fault for starting late today. So I appreciate you being here, being on the roller coaster, and just love and admire you, man. So thank you.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me. We'll do it again.
It's a wrap.